What is up, guys? Welcome back to the channel. My name is Tian. I'm a final year medical student studying in the UK. On this channel, I talk about mental health for medical students, as well as how to study smart and pass medical school exams with no stress or as little stress as possible. So I've thought a lot about today's video. I've spent hours trying to come up with the best, most valuable lessons I've learned in medical school on how to study. And this is exactly how I switched down the easy mode of passing all my medical exams after I failed miserably in my first and second year. Like, this is how bad. Like, I'm not like a smart student. I'm not hardworking at all. Like, if I do this, right, like do this with me, and if I like knock on my forehead, pure cement, right, pure cement, and I was able to pass exams once I realized what I'm about to teach you today. So all you need to do, if you're struggling or if you get very stressed, just give this video your full attention, watch it, and then you can tell me if it helped you or not. Right, this is stupid drawing that I'm going to move away. So I want to give you 3 promises because I know this is going to be a slightly longer video than all the other ones I've made. So the first promise I want to give you today is there's going to be zero bullshit. Like, I'm not gonna tell you like you need to work harder, you just have to study harder, you just have to like do more hours, like other people are studying while you're not. It's none of that. Like, I'm not one of those people. I'm not gonna pretend to be one of those people. So that's the first promise. Second promise is this video is going to be beyond all methods and techniques, because you've seen them, I've seen them, we've seen enough videos about how I studied, how I passed medical exams with no notes at all. But you and I know that just because that method worked for that one YouTuber, it doesn't mean it will work for us, right? So I'm not going to teach you like a specific, I'm not going to mention what I do, but I'm not going to insist on a specific method or a specific technique. And at the end of the day, that is not really what decides if you pass or not. So I'm not going to teach you something like that. And we've seen enough videos about if you should use a flashcard or you should do like a Notion thing, like that. There's enough of those things, so I'm not going to talk about that. And last thing is that this video, once you understand this, it's going to give you control of your learning, right? This I'm going to write, give you control of your learning, and you're gonna realize like actually passing med school, passing all your exams or any sort of exams is actually so easy once you understand this. Like, it doesn't require any like struggling. You don't have to cry over that. It's not that difficult, but you have to understand like these first principles. This is all I'm gonna talk about, the first principles of learning in 2025. Okay, so remember the cement analogy? I was not joking. Like, back in my first and second year, I failed so miserably. Like, the first exam I did in med school, I didn't know how to study. I didn't know what to learn. I got like 18% or something like that. And the second one, I didn't pass. And then I had a resit. I didn't pass. I had to resit the whole year. Like, again, like in my A levels, even in my A levels, I was great at math. Like, why wouldn't I? But my biology and chemistry, they were so bad. I didn't even know how I got into medical school. And even then, like, I got into medical school with a lot of luck, everything caught up. So I'm not one of those smart kids that like you can just learn and just study and just pass all your exams. I'm one of you. Like, if you're watching this, I used to struggle probably more than you do. So you better believe that what I'm going to tell you is what's going to work, right? So let's draw a diagram, because this whole thing is going to be like a big cycle, a big loop. And let's draw a diagram. So in the middle, I'm going to say this. You probably should screenshot this once we finish, right? This is how you should learn. So how to learn, right? So this is the title, right? So the first thing, you're not going to get this. Like, if I ask you, what do you think is the most important thing to learning? Let's start here. If you get this right, you probably can click off because you probably know everything I'm going to tell you. It probably will seem to be quite basic for you. But if you don't get this right, you probably should be watching. So what do you think is the most important thing for learning in medical school or in anything like at this day and age? And the answer to that, and I understand this way too late than I should have. The answer to that is you should always first define your purpose. You should always first define what are you learning for. And it has to be so specific, because even if you're not like if you're a bit general, then you're not gonna be able to find the most effective way to reach your goal. So I'm gonna give you an example that you probably will relate to. Studying medicine as an Asian student, right? So you're gonna say to become a doctor. Now that is a really bad answer, because I used to tell myself that every single day, especially like once I got into medical school. I got so pumped, like, okay, I'm gonna be the best doctor, I'm gonna be responsible, I'm gonna love my patients, I'm gonna be empathetic, I'm gonna be so knowledgeable, like, and one of those like what was that autistic doctor called? Someone asked me a question, I'm gonna know like the exact anatomy because I've read the books so many times, or I'm just talented. I have the whole picture of like which vein or which artery is in my mind. So I'm gonna be so knowledgeable. Like I'm gonna be the perfect doctor, right? That is what killed me. That is the thing that nearly got me kicked out of medical school, that mindset. So let me just tell you straight. The reason, like your purpose of learning at this stage as a student is purely to pass your exam. Okay? So let's start here. Purpose. So you have to be specific. And let's take another example. Like when you go on the wards, like when you're in your clinical years, sometimes the purpose of your learning is purely to be able to examine a patient. Now, that examination might not come up in your OSCE exam, but you need to learn it, and you learn it in such a different way, right? I'll give you an example. Something that like really left an impression in my mind is when we went to the stroke ward, so patients living with stroke, and the stroke consultant taught us how to do a cranial nerve examination on like stroke patients living with stroke. So let's say someone had homonomous hemianopia, right? So they can't see half of their vision. So the way you do their visual field is so different than how you are supposed to do it in OSCE. Because those patients, like a lot of times, they're quite elderly, they're quite frail, they're quite fatigued. And if you do this like whole thing, like you go like, okay, look into my eyes and tell me when you see my finger, like they're not gonna understand that instruction clearly. They're not gonna be able to understand it. And I tried it myself. Like the consultant was like, okay, go do it your way. So I did it. And then there was this one patient, like whenever I say, look at my face, look at my eyes, and tell me when you see my finger wiggling, he like as soon as I start wiggling my finger, his eyes start looking at my finger, and I have to go, no, I want your eye to look straight into my eye, and he just doesn't get it, right? So he taught us a whole different way that's much more easier to understand for those patients. So once you have that specific purpose in mind, it will make whatever you do so much more specific. So you have that purpose. So with purpose, the second step comes with practice. Okay? So only when you have the purpose, what I want you to do is I want you to jump straight into practice. So here I want you to remember like one first principle, okay? If you want to do something and want to be good at it, you have to do it. You have to do it many, many times. So let's write that down because that's important, right? If you want to be good at something, you have to do it many times. So why is that important? Because we tell ourselves way too many times that we need to read those textbooks, we need to read those lecture handouts, and if we know the knowledge, then we are able to answer whatever questions that come up. But what happens is, in exam, you see a question and it requires your ability to retrieve the information rather than to consume it and memorize it. It's two different pathways. You do realize that, right? Like when you read stuff, even if you're trying to memorize it, you're trying to turn the knowledge on the paper, on a screen, into your mind. But in the exam, what happens is you see a question, you're trying to retrieve some information out of your mind back onto the paper or the screen. It's two different pathways. So unless you do your practice, unless you do it, actually practice that specific pathway that you're going to be tested on, you're not going to be good at it. It's just simple as that. And what practice produces is what we call skill and experiences. And this is where it's very, very interesting, because skill and experience are way, way more valuable than knowledge. All right, this is a first principle that you have to remember from day one. Like right now, if you don't know this, if you still think like you want to be knowledgeable, then this is where you change. You want to be skillful and you want to be experienced. Okay? So skill and experience are way more important than knowledge in today's day and age. Maybe in the past, like you can ask the guy in imagine you're like in 1800s village, right? Like you're trying to ask the most knowledgeable guy who's probably like an old dude who sits outside of his house like on a little chair every day under the sun, and like that's like the guy who knows, like the guy who knows some people. Like you want to get to like, I don't know, you want to get your clothes tailored, you have to ask him. You want to know what happened today in the city, you have to ask him. Like he's the guy that's most knowledgeable, and he is the most valuable person. But in today's age with ChatGPT and AI and internet, knowledge is cheap. But skill and experience, they are important, and they only comes from practice. Okay, so if you're just trying to learn knowledge, that's not enough. And that is a byproduct that's important. And with the practice, I'm going to jot here, okay? With the practice comes something very important. With the practice, we are able to identify learning points. And you're going to ask me like, oh, you just said like you just need skill and experience. So why do you still need, like, what is this learning point about? Well, I'm going to tell you. So learning points are not the same as knowledge. Remember that. The learning points are things that you need to memorize and understand specifically for your context. I'm going to tell you why you still need to like learn some of these things in a bit. But you just have, right now at this very minute, you have to understand with practice comes skill and experiences that are very, very important on their own. But also with practice, because you make mistakes in your practice, let's say you do question banks and you get a lot of things wrong, and those things that you go wrong are your learning points. And these learning points are not general knowledge. These learning points are already molded into like the context that you're in, right? These learning points are the things you need to know in order to practice better. So you can already see how this like loop is gonna come back in the end, right? So with these learning points, you have to understand them and you have to memorize them. So you know people who go like, all I do for my revision are doing question banks. All I do for my revision are doing questions. And then they pass. And then some people listen to them. They listen to the advice. They watch the video on that. Like, okay, I'm just going to do questions. I'm going to do 5,000 questions. And then they don't do like as well, right? Because they didn't tell you the truth. It's not just about the practice. It's about practicing and identifying your learning points. Okay, so how do I do, like I said, I'm not going to like insist on a method, but how do I identify these learning points? So there's one rule that I found is really, really good, is that if I need to take notes, like if I can search up and access these learning points without taking any notes and I can understand them, then I won't take any notes. One example is, let's say I have like a subscription for a question bank, right? And if I do like a set of like 50 questions, I get those questions, like some of those questions wrong, and I can just like access those 50 questions again and scroll through the things that I got wrong. And then if I don't understand them, I can just ask ChatGPT, but it's just one or two questions. Most of them I can read the explanation and then learn from that. Then I won't take any notes. But let's say I'm on a ward or like in a ward-based teaching, something like that, and the professor or the consultant said something that's very, very good that I think I should take it down because I want to memorize it. and then I can't access that memory easily, or I can't like get that consultant to sit next to me every single day when I study, just so that I can ask him like, wait, that day you said that, what was that again? I can't do that. Then in that case, I will take notes. So that's like a very good rule for me to decide if I should take notes or not. If you have a bit of OCD like me, you have to have like rules. Then I get exactly the pain you have, because you have to be like, okay, should I take notes? How should I take notes? And then do I take notes on everything? Like, do I do them systematically, or do I do them with a pen and a paper? Or do I do them on Google Docs? How should I organize it? You spend most of the time organizing it. I get your pain. So maybe you should use that as well. I think that's worked for me really well so far. Anyways, why should you understand and memorize your learning points? And remember, they are not the same as knowledge, because learning points are the same as, they're not knowledge, but they are applicable knowledge. They are knowledge relevant. They're relevant knowledge. They're applicable knowledge. And you have those applicable knowledge within your memory, so you can generate one thing that's also very valuable in today's day and age, which is speed. So speed, skill, and experience. These things are much more important than knowledge, which is what most people think. Like, they do flashcards, whatever they do, like they're trying to build up their knowledge. But speed, skill, and experience are what actually gonna get you to places. So the reason you want to identify your learning points, you want to understand them, you want to memorize them, is so you can generate speed. It's so you can it's almost like a RAM for your computer. Imagine your computer, like it can do everything if it has enough time. And then how can you make a computer actually useful? To have a RAM, right? So you have like 8 gigabytes of RAM. It means it can process things. It already knows some of the things, like short-term memory, so it can quickly use that short-term memory to like deduct like a conclusion, right? Something like that. So you already know like the basics of like how a, let's say, body system work. Therefore, when something goes wrong, you know what, like how the knock-on effects, like how the knock-on effects happen on the rest of the systems, right? So you need that important applicable knowledge so you can generate speed, because everyone can do anything if you give them enough times now. They just have to go online and ask ChatGPT. They can start from what is a cell. They can start from that, and then they can work out in the end what is a heart attack, and they can work out how you can read the ECG. With ECG, they can start with like, what is paper? What is electricity? And you give them 1,000,000 years, they're going to work it out. But that's useless, right? That's useless. So you need speed. Right. So think of speed as the RAM of your brain. The RAM of your brain. Okay? So speed is important so you can build things up. And with speed, which allows you to practice more. With speed, it allows you to practice more bigger volumes. Therefore, you can build up more skill, more experience, okay, plus. You can identify more learning points, and from there, you can generate more speed because you build up applicable knowledge, you understand and memorize them, so they are RAM in your brain, so you can make better decisions. I should write that. Generate speed so you can make better decisions. Whether it is in exam, like which multiple choice you're gonna pick, that is literally a decision, or in like when you become a doctor, actually, like what do you want to do for your patients, that they are decisions. So as I said, this is like a first principle thing. So with speed, you can make better decisions, and the practice of making decisions builds you skill and experience. With them, you also identify learning points from your mistakes. You choose to memorize, and you choose to identify and memorize those things. Like, you literally cherry pick those things so you can memorize them, so you can generate more speed. And then you see, I'm already repeating myself again and again. It's actually not that difficult. But the problem with like the things you watch on YouTube or the things you learn, you hear from, like the advice you hear from your colleagues who are doing really well, is they would tell you one of the things and they would swear on it, saying that is literally how I. So like I can tell you, like I do question banks. This is literally all I use to pass my exam, but I won't tell you this is what actually happens, right? So you're gonna take that advice and you go away and you start doing question banks and you don't get the results you wanted, and you wonder why you work so hard and you still failed, but other people, they're like partying at weekends. Or someone's gonna tell you, I have like a perfect study schedule. I do like 8 hours of study with no breaks, right? So they're probably telling you the bit that they are doing, like understanding and memorizing only the things that are important and relevant for their purpose. And you're gonna think, oh my god, they're probably learning everything. So you start reading all the textbooks, you're like doing like solid learning, you're trying to build up your knowledge, and then you don't do so as them. So that is the point. That is the point of this videos, and I hope I delivered what I promised, right? So as I said, this is a general principle. It is beyond all methods and technique, and I hope now you feel like you're in control of your learning. Like whatever method you're doing, I don't really care. Like they work. I know they work for different people. So the only thing you need to have is this mindset first. So with this, then build your study system, then build your techniques, then like decide how you're gonna schedule and plan and like how hard you want to work, because then it will work, right? How do I do it personally? So with practice, I already said I do mostly question banks. I don't really do anything else. In the UK, there's a big thing called 0 to Finals. It's like a book by a doctor who wrote it for medical students. It was really good, but I don't really use it, and I still passed my exams pretty well. So this is what I mean. Like I don't do that. I only do question banks. And with identifying learning points, I just do them. And if I identify the things I got wrong, I would actually handwrite them onto as notes. I can show you straight away here actually. So if I go out of this app, and this is the thing I use to write my notes, right? So let's say, oh, here we go, perfect. So A&E intensive care. So these are the notes I've written, let's say for like revising for my finals. So these are the things I got wrong, let's say in a section of 200 questions, and for the things I got wrong, I wrote them down and will talk through them like 3 times before I move on to another pack of questions. So at the end of the whole like revision schedule, I won't have done as many questions as most people, but I'm quite confident about the things that I have gotten wrong and have learned. So this is what I mean, right? So I identify learning points and I talk through them so that whenever I see that question again, I can make better decisions. So this is extremely different than having like a huge Kuhlman Clark textbook and going through 2 pages of that every single day, which I think is what people used to do. Right, and then I come back, I do more questions, and yeah, so I do that as a cycle. And I hope that was useful to you. If you're struggling with your exams, or if you're struggling mentally with anxiety and you're feeling depressed as a medical student, I want you to know that you're not alone. And if you want, you can subscribe to this channel, because then I can probably give you some words of encouragement or words of comfort when you need it. But that's up to you. And thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next one.